So Maya here just wrote a book. In fact, it hasn't even officially been published yet. But the book is called Invaluable. And we recently got connected on LinkedIn, and I realized it'd be a great chance for her to lend me a helping hand, but also, get some exposure for her new book, and most importantly, help out everyone else on LinkedIn. Because truthfully, how you manage yourself professionally, the relationships you build, what you do, what you say, all these factors, right, that go into how valuable an employee you're seen as, there are one of the more important factors when it determines career advancement. And no one's ever taught anything about this. We're all just kind of left on our own to figure it out. And some people are great at figuring it out, and they rise up the ladder and they see opportunities. And some people aren't great at figuring it out and they struggle the whole career. And, these two people could very well be equally talented. It's just a matter of, their knack for navigating these spaces. So anyways, Maya's here. Before we get started with the conversation, can you tell us just a little bit more about your book?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for initiating this conversation. By the way, I love talking about career development. Obviously, this is why I wrote a book. And I was just telling you off camera that I just got the proof copy, which is very exciting because I can actually hold my book, which is very weird. I've been dreaming about this for a very long time. So I've been a marketer for 15 years, but throughout my career, I've always enjoyed helping others, mentoring people. I'm the person who always is ready to give advice. And I've been doing it for so long that at some point I realized, hey, I'm giving the same advice over and over again. Maybe I can write a book, and that way I can help more people and kind of give advice at scale. And this is how Invaluable was born.
That's so cool. All right, then. Well, so, my last company, right, I was fired. And just to keep it thematic, it was a matter of clashing styles. That was kind of an issue from the get-go. And it was also a matter of an erosion of trust that happened, over the last, I'm not even sure, 6 to 12 months, something like that. So I want to make sure as I move into my next company that I don't have these same issues, right? I want to make sure. Now, fortunately, I was very selective in choosing a company, and I know the company I'm going into, I'm not really going to have that issue of classing styles too much, right? Obviously, everyone's different. There's going to be some, ways that I'm sure styles conflict, but, the more powerful driving forces of my professional style are well aligned. So at least we got that going for us. But I want to make sure that as I kind of get started on this new career path, that I truly do make myself invaluable to my new employer. I want to make sure I build trust and relationship that lasts forever. I guess start me off, right? Like I'm literally starting Monday. So what should I be doing on day one? What should my first 30 days look like, right? How should I be conducting myself as I get to know this new company?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, it's great that you did the research to actually figure out whether or not you're going to have that clash of cultures. You figured out that, yeah, it's going to be a good fit. I think it's something a lot of people just skip on because it's so much easier to see a big name or a fancy company and just be like, hey, I want to work for them. But you don't take the time to actually, get to know the people, understand the culture. And I think it's a huge, huge miss if you get it wrong. So kudos for you for actually doing that. In terms of setting yourself up for, let's say, your first 30 days, there are a couple of things that I usually recommend doing. And it's things that I've done throughout my career and really helped me stand out. The first thing you do is actually before you start your first day. It's going out there and doing research, but I'm not talking about just Googling the company name. I'm talking about going very, very deep to understand who they are, who the customers are, what their business model, how are they actually selling right now. If it's a public company, go listen to earning calls. If you can do some stalking for the people you're going to be working with, go listen to interviews that they did. Try to understand where they're coming from and who they are as a person. So for me, that would probably take a couple of days of preparations or at least, 10, 15 hours of really understanding the company. And here's why it's important. A lot of people assume that they would just come to the company and they'll have a week or 2 weeks of onboarding, and they expect their manager or the company to teach them everything. And with some companies, that's okay. That's what you're going to get through. But if you work for a smaller company, especially, or a startup, they would expect you to hit the ground running. And I actually think being able to do that is a great way to differentiate yourself. So imagine going into the first meeting and instead of asking basic questions like, hey, what's your business model? Or, who are your customers? to ask, very strategic, high level questions about the problems that they're facing, about, the latest report that you read. It just sets you apart. And it allows you to start from a very different point than anyone else. And at least for me, it's been a great way to make an impact, especially with my managers. They've always really appreciated that. So I think preparation starts before you actually get in your first day.
Yeah.
I think
So
something
the
else. Yeah, go ahead.
company that I'm joining right now, a publicly traded company, so there's no like earnings calls or anything. Obviously, I can go into their website and dive as deep as I can. But again, being a fairly new company, there's not a ton on the website. What are some other places I should be checking other than the company's website to learn these things?
Yeah, well, if it's a smaller company, especially a startup, you can go to crunchbase.com to learn about funding, to see some of the information about their business model. You can go to websites like G2 and Capterra. These are review websites, and you can see what the customers think about the product, or at least get a bit of a view. A lot of the time with Capterra and G2, you have demos of the product, so you can actually take a look, see it in action. They also provide an overview of the market, so you can see your competitors, you can get some insights and trends and really understand what you're getting into. So trust me, there are a lot of resources out there. You can go, a lot beyond just doing a Google search, and I think that will automatically set you apart.
Cool. All right, so that's first thing. I got it down. What's next?
Yeah, I think the next thing I would try to do is focus on building relationships. And I think it's probably a little bit different now that you're remote, but I think a lot of people, especially when they're new to the company, they kind of take a step back and they wait for other people to come to them. And I think you should do exactly the opposite. I think you should be the person initiating. I think you should have a no agenda conversation, 15 minutes, just to get to know the people you're going to be working with, and just keep it casual and fun. I mean, if you're in the office, I would say just grab them in the kitchen, but since, we're doing this remotely, then maybe just grab a Zoom call with them, but make sure you talk to, if it's a small company, everyone. If it's a bigger company, then your business unit. So for example, when I joined Colo as the VP of marketing, I spent time talking to the sales team and the product team, but I also spoke to the engineers. I wanted to get to know everyone and make sure that they know me and that I'm there to help them. I think that's a great way to set yourself apart once again.
Perfect.
And I would say the third thing that is really important, and a lot of people for some reason tend to avoid, is to speak up, to actually share your thoughts, your opinions, your ideas during your first 30 days. And here's why. When you're new to a company, you have a very fresh perspective. You don't have any biases. You don't know how they're used to doing things. So it's much easier for you to spot problems or come up with ideas that the company just can't see, because they're kind of stuck in their own little world. And I think people are afraid to make a statement that they think maybe it will seem like they're kind of challenging their managers, or they don't respect the company. But I actually think it's a great way to bring in value in your first 30 days. So if you don't feel comfortable enough, if maybe the culture does not allow you to necessarily raise your hand and say, hey, something's wrong, you can always position it as a question. So instead of telling someone, you know what, I think your website is not converting, you can say, hey, in my previous company, we actually did XYZ and the conversion was very high. Have you considered it before? And I think that way you kind of reduce the risk of, being seen in the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, that's good to bring up, right? Because there definitely are some companies where, that could be seen as a negative, or even, there are some people that maybe the natural way they communicate, it wouldn't come across the right way. So asking the question is a pretty safe way to go about that.
Yeah.
All right. I love that you're mentioning that, because I've often thought that, right? I've often noticed that when a new hire comes in, as much as the company is going to be teaching them a lot, it shouldn't be one way, because there are definitely some biases that the company is steeped in that the new hire is free of, right? So I've always felt that way. I almost wonder if, in the future, companies will start taking that as a regular practice of maybe after 30 days sitting down with new hires and saying, give us advice, right? I think that'd be so cool.
I think they should. And you know what? I've been talking to young professionals in the last year, and a lot of them are very afraid to speak up and kind of say what they think, because it seems like if you're a student, if this is your first job, then you don't have the right to
Yeah.
actually speak up. I think it's exactly the opposite. I think companies should seek those students and those new hires to get their opinion, because beyond just having that fresh perspective, someone from a different generation has a completely different view of the landscape, of the audience. You never know where you're going to get the next best idea. And let's be honest, in 5 to 10 years, the majority of the workforce is going to be Gen Zers. Why not tap into their, insights right now
Mhm.
and start building, for the next generation?
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so my first 30 days, right, learn a crap ton about the company. I can do that before I even start, so I can do that kind of this week leading up to it. Get really proactive about meeting people, setting up Zoom calls,
Yeah.
coffee dates, whatever through Zoom, um, and then share my ideas, right? Which again, I'm the company's going to be very open to that, so it'll be easy for me. For some people, that's harder. Anything else that I should be doing right away as soon as I land?
Yeah, my biggest thing, and this is something I've been doing for the past decade, you need to have a win in your first 30 days. So no matter what you do, whether you're in an entry level position or you're an executive, you need to have something that is a big win for you and for the company. So you don't have to completely reinvent something. You don't need to build a 5-year strategy, but if you can build something small and fix it, or come up with a new idea and actually execute it, I think it makes a world of difference, because most people spend their first 30 and sometimes 60 days just learning and onboarding and listening. And that's important. You still need to do that, but they're not able to show who they are. And people kind of forget, like, yeah, he joined a couple of months ago. I don't know what he's doing. But if you have a win in the first 30 days, everyone in the company knows who you are. They know you're a doer, and they know they can trust you. So that will definitely be something I would look into.
Oh, sweet, no pressure.
It's not as big as it sounds. Let me give you an example. So when I first joined Kolu, as I mentioned before, I was the first marketer, and I basically had to come up with the strategy for the year. Very small task. But obviously, I couldn't do it in 30 days. I still had to get to know my customers. I still had to understand how the company works. It takes a little bit more time, but I wanted to have a quick win. So I started by looking at the data. As a marketer, I had access to everything that the company was doing before I joined. And I was able to see with the data that we don't have a problem generating traffic to our website. We don't have a problem creating demand for our product. But once people actually were onboarded, they were not using it. We had a problem with activation.
Yeah.
And I didn't know 100% how to solve it, but I had an idea. I figured, we were not communicating with our customers after they actually onboarded to the product. If I build an email sequence and I'll nurture them and I'll remind them they can use it, maybe it will improve what we're doing. So I took the crappiest email provider I could find that was free, and I built this whole thing in like 2 days, and I just set it up. It was terrible. It wasn't perfect. But you know what? It actually started moving conversion and activation into the right place. So I didn't figure everything out in the first 30 days, but I had a direction, and I was able, to show the CEO and the company, hey, I'm already fixing this problem. Now I need budget to make it perfect, to have the right tools and to actually make it work. And again, it was just a matter of a couple of days. It didn't require, rocket science. I didn't
Yeah.
need to recreate, something, but it made a huge impact. And it was, it showed the company that I'm here to actually get the job done, not just think and talk and sit in meetings all day long, which some people tend to do.
Yeah, for sure. So here's a question. Let's say, you're more of an entry level employee and people don't really expect or want you to solve the company's bigger problems. Would you
Yeah.
advise working up a rough draft kind of on your own, kind of in a dark, silent lab, so to speak, and then sharing your rough draft and saying, hey, I got this rough draft. What do you think? Or would you suggest letting your manager know from day one, hey, I'm about to start working on this thing? Like, when do you open up the rest of the world to come and see what you're doing? I guess is the question.
Yeah. I think it really depends on your situation. So If I was able to build a relationship with my manager very quickly and it felt like there was trust there, I would probably loop them in and kind of get their approval. If I wasn't sure yet, or if I wasn't able to build that trust, I would find something very small that's very actionable. Like, I'm not going to change how we do social media, but maybe I'm going to change the theme for next week
Mm.
and come up with that suggestion and kind of show it to my manager when it's pretty much done. um, I think just different situation, you should go with your gut. I'm all for people taking initiative and actually executing, but some managers they need more time to be able to trust their employees. So sometimes it's better to run it by them, but show the initiative. I mean, come to them when you actually have something ready, not just an idea.
Yeah. I figure, even if you don't feel like you have the power, or, it's a company whose culture isn't quite right for you to actually implement anything, I figure at least if you can give them a fully hatched plan that's ready to go, right? Like, here's my email sequence. I haven't sent it to anybody yet, but here it is sitting here waiting for you, 10 emails, right?
Exactly. And it's also easier to say yes at this point. When it's an
Right.
idea, sometimes they can't imagine what it would look like. They think it's going to take hours now. But if it's already done, it's
Yeah,
so easy to say yes.
it's cool. All right, so that's some of the first 30 days landing with a splash type of stuff. And I think in my last company, I don't know, but I think I did pretty well, make a good impression the first 30 days. As time went on, things deteriorated, right? So, what are some things to, I guess, think about in the longer term, longer horizon for being an invaluable employee?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you want to have an owner's mindset. And I think some people have the wrong idea of what that means. They think, companies use owner mindset to get their employees to work 24/7, but that's not what I'm thinking about. Having an owner's mindset means that you're capable of seeing your own work, but you're also capable of seeing the bigger picture. You can think in terms of what's best for the company, not just what's best for me. It means that you always want to fix problems if you see them, because the success of the company is not just your personal success, but everyone's success. And it's something that takes time to get used to. I mean, some people, always tell me, why would I do this? Why would I think long term? Why would I think like an owner when I'm not getting compensated like an owner? I mean, I'm just
Sure.
an employee. And I totally get that. But I think it starts by realizing that sometimes you need to do things in the short term so you can see value in the long term. Being able to think like that, this is what got me to become a manager quicker than anyone else in the company that I worked for. This is what got me 10 promotions in 15 years, because at least most companies I worked for really appreciated someone who could see the bigger picture, but they were also able to pay attention to the details of the day-to-day work. And I love telling this story. I think I've told it before. I joined a very small company. We were 5 or 6 people. The founders were very much focused on bringing in more clients, and all of the account managers were just kind of doing their own thing. So it was the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
And it really bugged me because I was very proud of my work and the company, and I wanted to make sure that our customers were happy. So I thought about it for a little bit, try to understand how can we change this situation and have a little bit more structure. I put together a plan, like seriously, one page
Mhm.
document. I just wrote down, we need structure, we need templates, we need to have a work process. Oh, and we need a manager. And I went to the company founder and I told him, hey, I know you're very much, spending your time bringing new clients and you can see what's happening in the day to day, but we have a problem. Here's how we can fix it. Um, and I was expecting him to just say thank you and, go and hire a manager. And he basically laughed at me and said, great, you're the new manager, go fix it. And I have to tell you, anyone at that company at that point had the same experience as me. They had a very similar background. They could have all do exactly the same, but no one actually had the foresight to think, about the bigger picture and take action. And that's what made a difference.
Yeah. Here's a question I'm very curious to hear your take on. Can you kind of talk to us about the relative importance of and the relative weight of, and maybe even the place of likability and competency? Because you need the elements of both. Could you talk about those two elements when it comes to career success?
That's very interesting. I'm trying to think about it from a hiring manager perspective. And for me, I think I'm mostly focused on people's ability to actually drive results. I've worked with people who were not my best friends, who I wouldn't necessarily go out for a drink, but we got along very well because they delivered, because they did the job they had to do. So I think they're both important, but it really depends on who your manager is and what the environment is. For some people, likability will actually triumph achievements.
Mhm.
And for other people, they would first look at what you can actually do. I mean, it's always good to at least be, you know, uh, liked by most people. They don't have to love you. You don't have to be their best friend. You don't have to go out, every weekend together, but just have the status quo of, people don't think you're a jerk, basically.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Um, what else on the long-term side of things, right? Long-term, whether you're going to just look at like a 90-day time horizon or even just kind of take advice out indefinitely. Um, what else you got for us?
I think one of the biggest things I've seen throughout my career, and I've seen it with bigger companies, I've seen it with smaller startups, people tend to focus on outputs instead of outcomes. So they optimize for their task list so they can actually cross things off instead of actually thinking about the goals that they're trying to achieve. So they would look at Facebook likes instead of thinking, hey, the point of even being on social media is to get customers for the company. So it doesn't matter how many likes we have, it matters how many people actually go to the website and sign up.
Hmm.
And a lot of people are just stuck on doing things that have absolutely no impact. And they spend a lot of time working, they put in a ton of hours, but they have no results. So I think if you really want to be an invaluable employee, it's not about the amount of hours you put in, it's about the outcomes and the impact you can actually make. So if you always focus on that, if this is how you actually prioritize your tasks, I think you're going to be able to stand out.
Interesting. So your advice is focus more on the actual end goal outcome that you need rather than just focusing on, checking the box and saying I did the thing, right? The outputs, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I look at it from a sales perspective, it's not about how many calls you make. I don't want you to make 120 calls if your conversion rate is going to be zero point 0.1.
Yeah.
I would much rather for you to have 50 meaningful conversations and have 20% of them actually convert. And I think that's a shift in mindset because sometimes it's about hours. I had a boss once that every time I left the office at 6 o'clock, which was the time I was supposed to leave, would look at me and say, "Oh, leaving so early? Is this a half day?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just the wrong mindset. I had a different manager who told me, "I don't care when you come to the office. I don't care when you leave. If you do your job, you manage your schedule." Imagine where I was able to deliver more.
Yeah. That's interesting. Just playing devil's advocate a little bit here. Um, I think the reason a lot of times people do focus on the output is that that is something you have direct control over, right? As a salesperson, you don't always have direct control over whether or not they say yes or no, whether or not they answer the phone or don't answer the phone, but you do have control for whether or not you do your 100 dials a day, right? So a lot of people choose to go that path, and a lot of managers push you towards that path because it's all about focusing on what you can control versus, what's out of your control sometimes. Now, is that contradictory to what you're saying, or can those two coexist together?
I understand why it drives this perception, but I still think it makes absolutely no sense. I mean, why would you want to have 100 calls, just to use this example,
Hmm.
if none of them actually converts? What's the point? Why would you do that? That's busy work. You don't actually deliver any results for the company. And the whole point of hiring you is to get more customers. So if you're not actually delivering on that, why do we need you?
Yeah.
I mean, you can have an intern sit down and make those calls, and nothing will happen exactly the same way, and it will cost the company a lot less.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess kind of, in closing here, what kind of advice do you have for growing a network of relationships and maintaining a network of relationships across the company? You gave the advice about when you first land, have
Yeah.
coffee, lunch, and Zoom with people. But I just know that, especially in a lot of companies, you might only directly contact 3 or 4 people in your day-to-day life, and yet there's 100 people in the company, right? Like, I don't know, any advice on how to maintain those relationships and develop those relationships further?
Yeah, I think you need to start by identifying the stakeholders that really matter to you. Those are the people you need to stay in close contact with. So maybe have a monthly update call with them. And this is something I did a lot when I worked for Microsoft, huge company.
Hmm.
I mostly spent my time with my team that was very small, but I definitely needed to talk to people at headquarters and kind of build that relationship. So monthly, sometimes quarterly is enough. I think you should also identify stakeholders that you care about. They may not be important to your day-to-day job, but maybe they're great mentors. Maybe they have a skill that you want to learn. Maybe, you know what, they belong to a completely different team, but you're thinking about moving to that direction. So you want to start building that relationship. And maybe it's just someone that has a lot of say in the company and you want to have their back. You want them to have your back if you come up with an idea, if you want a promotion, something like that. So you actually need to do the work. I used to have an Excel sheet with names of people, just looking at the org chart and kind of mapping everyone out. You don't need like 25 is more than enough because it's hard to maintain those relationships. And just, reach out to them every now and then. Figure out how you can add value to them. Maybe based on your conversation, you learn that they care about something in their professional or personal life. I had someone where we both really enjoyed cooking, so I would send them recipes every now and then and kind of share my feedback. And we built a relationship based on that. So I think just having that very close-knit relationship with the people you actually work with, and then having those people that are a little bit more removed, but you have to stay in touch with them. And the thing is, if you don't put it on your calendar and if you don't plan it, it will never happen. It's just the way it is. So just be very intentional about it.
It's cool. One thing I did at my last company, which, stopped doing once COVID hit, but every Tuesday, my lunch hour was blocked off to go have lunch with somebody. And I just kind of had to figure out in advance who's it going to be, right? But yeah, I think you're right. You got a time block for that. And I like that you had like that spreadsheet, that you kind of kept track of. It's interesting, in sales, we do that type of thing when it comes to managing the relationships with our customers, right? CRM is customer relationship
Yep.
management. People spend buku bucks on CRM systems to effectively manage relationships with customers. And that's where you keep notes as to what their likes and dislikes are. You keep record as the last time you reached out. You set reminders for the next time you want to reach out. So you just kind of take the same concept and apply it internally, right, to your company.
Yeah, I think so. And to be honest, look, the most important relationship is probably your relationship with your manager.
Right.
And it can be a challenging relationship. I mean, I've been lucky in my career sometimes to have managers who were my best friends, and they still are, and they're great mentors. And I've had managers who were a little bit more challenging, and we
Sure.
didn't see eye to eye on everything. But I think there are a couple of things you can do to really establish trust.
Mhm.
And even if you're not the best of friends, even if you don't see everything the same way, you can still have that understanding that whenever they need you, you will have their back and you will do what is necessary to make them look good. And if they can trust you to do that, they will trust you to do everything else.
Interesting. Can you tell us what those things are?
Well, first and foremost, get to know them. Get to know them as people, not just as your manager. It doesn't mean you need to have a beer, but it means that on your weekly meetings, you don't just stick to, the work agenda, but you actually ask a few questions. Maybe you tell them a little bit about yourself and you kind of build that relationship and you start understanding where they're coming from. You also need to know what they're optimizing for. What are their goals? What do they actually need to deliver, as employees in the company? Because your goals are going to have to align to theirs. The more you can contribute to their success, the more you're going to be successful, period. So you have to make sure you know what they need. It will also allow you to see opportunities and to kind of be their eyes on the ground when they can't see different things. Just to give you an example, when I was doing consulting for Google, I spent a lot of time in the office with the team, but most of the management was working remotely. So I had a lot of face-to-face time with them, and I started hearing, that they're a little bit confused, that they're not sure what the North Star was. There wasn't enough alignment between management and the team, but the management couldn't see it because they were all remote. And I kind of got to spend the day to day and hear the complaints and the
Yeah.
conversations. And at that point, I was able to go back to the hiring manager, the person who brought me in, and say, hey, I think you have some challenges with communications. I know you're doing your best to figure it out remotely. Here are 5 things you can do to make everything better. So I didn't just tell them, hey, you have a problem, go fix it. I already had a suggestion based on my experience on how to actually make it better. And we implemented that plan the next week. And we saw an improvement very, very quickly. So,
Awesome.
some people could have said, oh, you don't know anything, you're an external consultant, butt out. But the way that you present, your findings and the way that you build that trust, I think is how you are actually able to show them, hey, you can trust me. I'm your eyes on the ground. I'm going to be you when you can't be here.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. Well, we only got a couple minutes left here to wrap up. So this last question I'm asking, mostly for my benefit, but also for the benefit of
Sure.
people watching, listening this. How do I buy your book?
Well, the book will launch officially on Amazon on September 15th. So, and I will definitely share that on LinkedIn. But if you want to know more, mayagrossman.com, or just reach out to me on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Maya. I will be putting on my calendar to go buy that book on September 15th because you gave me some good starters, but I definitely want to read the whole thing through so I can have, again, a better experience at this company than the last. So thanks a ton for your
Thank
time
you.
today.
Thank you so much, and good luck with your new job.